In 1990, Ghost made the world believe in love after death and quietly became the highest-grossing film of the year. But behind that iconic success was a cast living through addiction, abuse scandals, and death that never made a single headline. One arrived in America with just $335 and nowhere to sleep. Another top Hollywood actor vanished without warning. So what really happened to them? Let's find out. Patrick Swayze. Sam Wheat was supposed to be played by someone else, anyone else. At 38, Swayze was the last name on the director's list for Sam Wheat, after Harrison Ford didn't get it and Bruce Willis walked away from the chance to star opposite his own wife. What finally got Swayze the role was a single moment on a Barbara Walters interview where he broke down crying talking about his father, and the director saw exactly the man he needed. What nobody saw coming was how nervous that man actually was. Swayze rehearsed the pottery scene privately with Lisa at home because his face turned beet red just talking about it. Moore later said it felt like being in high school on a first date. The chemistry the whole world swooned over was really just two terrified people finding their footing together, and somehow that made it even more real. For years after Ghost, Swayze kept pushing. Point Break, to Wong Fu, roles that proved he was far more than a romantic lead. Then in January 2008, days after wrapping a TV pilot, he felt a burning in his abdomen. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. Doctors gave him weeks. His response was exactly what you'd expect. Watch me. He talked the network into keeping the show going, filmed 5 months in Chicago between chemo sessions, and took an experimental drug called Vitalinib that nobody was sure would work. His final performance wrote that the cancer seemed to be fueling him, and he seemed to be fueling it right back. Sadly, Patrick Swayze died September 14, 2009, 57 years old, from pancreatic cancer at home, with Lisa Nemi holding his hand. 34 years of marriage. No children. She was his whole world, and in the end, she was the only audience that mattered. Demi Moore. Demi Moore was 28 years old when she sat down at that pottery wheel and became Molly Jensen, a woman so consumed by grief she couldn't let go of a ghost. The funny thing is, she almost talked herself out of it entirely. She saw the script as a recipe for disaster and spent weeks convincing herself it was a mistake. Then she said yes anyway, and walked away with $350,000, a Golden Globe nomination, and a scene so iconic that 36 years later people still recreate it at pottery studios around the world. The fame that followed was Everything and Nothing at Once, A Few Good Men, Indecent Proposal, G.I. Jane, paychecks climbing until she became the highest-paid actress in Hollywood history at $12.5 million for striptease. But behind the magazine covers and the A-list everything, she was quietly battling alcohol dependency, feeling completely hollow inside a life everyone else envied. She later said the more the world worshipped her, the more unlovable she felt. She clawed her way back, rebuilt herself, and just when she seemed to have found solid ground, life handed her something no script could prepare her for. Watching Bruce Willis, her ex-husband and the father of her 3 daughters, slowly disappear inside frontotemporal dementia. She showed up anyway. Not as a wife, but as something harder to name. The person who stayed. In 2026, at 63, she returned to Cannes as a jury member and reminded the world exactly who she is. But the conversation has shifted uncomfortably. Her dramatically slimmer frame sent shockwaves through Hollywood, with people close to her quietly telling outlets they're worried she's slipping back. Moore insists she feels great. Every few weeks, she posts a birthday photo of Bruce Willis with his granddaughter, captioning it simply, "All you need is love." Molly Jensen spent a whole movie refusing to let go. Turns out, that was never just a character. Whoopi Goldberg. At 35, Whoopi Goldberg played Oda Mae Brown, A woman who'd built her entire life scamming people into believing she could speak to the dead, until a ghost named Sam Wheat showed up and made her actually do it. What nobody tells you is that Swayze fought hard to get her cast, flying to Alabama where she was filming another movie, sitting across from her and saying, "Please do this with me." She said yes anyway. Then she went and won the Oscar. She grew up in a housing project in Manhattan, dropped out of high school at 17, entered drug rehab after watching friends die from overdoses, and worked as a mortuary beautician just to survive. By the time Ghost happened, she had already clawed her way from nothing to a Golden Globe nomination for The Color Purple. Ghost gave her the Oscar. Sister Act made her the highest-paid actress in Hollywood. She went on to become one of only 28 people in history to achieve EGOT status. Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony, all four. In 2026, at 70, she's sitting on a reported $30 million net worth and still showing up to The View every morning. "I work for a living. If I had all the money in the world, I would not be here," she told her own audience. She survived double pneumonia and sepsis, reached 300 pounds while filming Till, went public about using Mounjaro to lose weight, and has recently been diagnosed with normal pressure hydrocephalus. She has hinted at retirement. But with bills to pay and a brain condition closing in, the woman who played a fake psychic for a living may be running out of time to choose. Vincent Schiavelli. You know his face even if you don't know his name. 6 feet, 6 inches tall, gaunt, with deep-set eyes that seem to carry the weight of every sad story ever told. At 42, Vincent Schiavelli played the subway ghost in Ghost, the angry spirit who haunts the underground and teaches Sam Wheat how to interact with the physical world. It was the role that fit him so perfectly it felt like it was written around his bones, and in a way it was. Schiavelli had Marfan syndrome, a rare genetic condition affecting connective tissue that gave him his extraordinary height, his long limbs, his unmistakable face. He was diagnosed at 9 years old and spent his entire life turning what made him different into what made him unforgettable. Just months before Ghost filmed, he had undergone emergency open-heart surgery to replace a faulty heart valve, a direct complication of Marfan syndrome. He showed up on set anyway, and gave one of the most memorable supporting performances in the film. He went on to appear in over 150 productions across 4 decades, from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest to Batman Returns to James Bond. Vanity Fair named him one of America's best character actors in 1997. Roger Ebert wrote that he had a way of slipping into films without people knowing his name, but they always remembered his performances. In his final years, he retreated to Polizzi Generosa, a small hill town in Sicily where his grandfather was born, writing cookbooks, learning the local dialect, appearing on Sicilian television. He died there on December 26, 2005, at 57, from lung cancer. Buried in the cemetery of the town he had chosen as home, far from Hollywood, exactly where he wanted to be. Tony Goldwyn. Most people don't know Tony Goldwyn only got into Ghost because his wife was the film's production designer. He was 30 years old when he turned Carl Brunner into one of cinema's most quietly terrifying villains, a man who smiled at his best friend's face and arranged his murder behind his back. It was his first villainous role, and he played it so convincingly that strangers genuinely hated him on the street for years afterward. He later said in interviews he enjoyed every second of it. What followed was a career built in 2 very different directions at once. On screen, Hollywood kept casting him as the charming man with something to hide. Behind the camera, he was quietly directing episodes of Grey's Anatomy, Dexter, and Scandal, building a reputation as one of the most trusted directors in prestige television while nobody was paying attention. Then Scandal gave him the role of President Fitzgerald Grant for 7 seasons, and suddenly the villain from Ghost was the most powerful man in America every Thursday night. In 2026, at 65, he's directing theater in New York, still active in Law and Order, and still married to Jane Muskie, the same woman who opened the door to Ghost back in 1990. 39 years together. In a town where nothing lasts, that might be the most shocking thing about him. Rick Aviles. Willie Lopez had 3 minutes of screen time in Ghost, just long enough to pull a gun, cause a murder, and set the entire story in motion. Rick Aviles was 38 when he played him, a Puerto Rican kid from Manhattan's Lower East Side who had spent the 1970s and 80s doing stand-up in Greenwich Village clubs and subway cars until the Village Voice named him Comic of the Year in 1980. By 1987, he was hosting It's Showtime at the Apollo. That same year, Variety called him one of the brightest and most consistently clever stand-ups working the circuit today. Willie Lopez was supposed to be the beginning. The years after Ghost moved fast. The Godfather Part 3 with Coppola in 1990. Carlito's Way alongside Al Pacino in 1993. Stephen King's The Stand on television in 1994. Waterworld in 1995. A Kevin Costner blockbuster that was supposed to be the biggest film of the year. On paper, it looked like a career finally arriving where it had always been heading. Behind all of it, Rick Aviles was dying. He had contracted HIV through heroin use years earlier. The same streets, the same city where he'd built everything. The stigma attached to both the disease and how he'd contracted it made the silence around it suffocating. He kept working anyway. He finished filming Waterworld. He never got to see it released. Rick Aviles died March 17, 1995 at the age of 42 from a pulmonary embolism caused by AIDS complications in Los Angeles. His family kept the funeral private. Hollywood barely paused. He was included in Entertainment Weekly's list of celebrities lost to AIDS, a footnote in a decade that had too many of them, for a man whose talent deserved far more. Armelia McQueen. She was 38 when she played Clara Brown in Ghost. Oda Mae's loud, warm, scene-stealing sister who showed up for just a few minutes and somehow made everyone in the theater wish she had more. But Ghost was never her defining moment. That had already happened 12 years earlier in 1978 when she stepped onto Broadway's Longacre Theater in Ain't Misbehavin', a Fats Waller musical that won the Tony for Best Musical and made her a Theater World Award winner for Best Debut Performance. Harvey Fierstein tweeted the day she died, "We've lost Armelia McQueen." Broadway knew exactly what that meant. Born in Southern Pines, North Carolina, and raised in Brooklyn, she had started from nothing, attending the HB studio in New York, taking her first role in an off Broadway revue in 1973, doing anything to stay on stage. Ain't Misbehavin' changed everything. She returned to the show for its 1988 revival, proving it wasn't luck the first time. She also toured nationally in Hair, Jesus Christ Superstar, South Pacific, Guys and Dolls. After Ghost, she kept moving. 100 episodes as the Red Queen in Disney's Adventures in Wonderland, 4 seasons as Shula Whitaker on Heart of Dixie, guest spots on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Martin, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. She never slowed down, never seemed to run out of energy or stages to fill, which is why nobody saw it coming. Armelia McQueen died October 3, 2020, 3 days before what would have been her 68th birthday. No cause of death was ever publicly released, just a brief illness, and then silence. The world found out she was gone through a Facebook post. Her friend Dorian Hanaway wrote, "The only thing bigger than her beautiful soul was her extraordinary talent." No press release, no studio announcement. Phil Leeds. In Ghost, the emergency room ghost was the first friendly face Sam Wheat saw after dying, a wisecracking spirit who made death feel almost manageable. Phil Leeds was 74 when he played him, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone. A man who had spent decades being erased from Hollywood was now playing a ghost. Back in the early 1950s, the House Un-American Activities Committee came for him. They wanted names, colleagues, friends, anyone suspected of communist ties. Leeds invoked the Fifth Amendment and refused to give them a single one. The blacklist took everything. While others around him named names to save their careers, he went quiet and waited. He sold peanuts outside Yankee Stadium in the Bronx when he was young. He knew how to survive on nothing. He came back eventually, opening for Barbra Streisand and Harry Belafonte in the 50s and 60s, appearing in Rosemary's Baby in 1968, then decades of television that kept his face familiar even when nobody could remember his name. Ghost, The Golden Girls, Friends. Ally McBeal loved him so much they dedicated an entire episode to eulogizing his character after he died in real life. Phil Leeds died August 16, 1998. Pneumonia, Cedars-Sinai, 82 years old, still on the call sheet. A man the blacklist tried to erase outlasted almost everyone who put him on it. Bruce Jarchow. Bruce Jarchow was 42 when he played Lyle Ferguson in Ghost. Sam Wheat's unremarkable banking colleague, the kind of background character whose entire purpose is to make the world feel real. It was a role that fit perfectly into what Jarchow had been doing his entire career, showing up, making scenes believable, and letting everyone else take the credit. He had started out in Chicago in the late 1970s as a member of the Second City Main Stage, the legendary improv troupe that launched the careers of Bill Murray, John Belushi, and Gilda Radner, winning the 1981 Joseph Jefferson Award for Actor in a Review. He was funny, precise, and completely comfortable being the smartest person in a scene that nobody remembered afterward. Ghost was just one stop on a career that quietly touched an astonishing number of projects. He was the photographer in Big with Tom Hanks in 1988. He played Dr. Maselli in the Dustin Hoffman pandemic thriller Outbreak in 1995. He appeared in Seinfeld Parks and Recreation, Desperate Housewives, ER, Stranger Than Fiction, and The Weatherman. He also taught improvisation at the Second City Training Center for years, passing on the craft to a generation of performers who would go on to become household names themselves. In 2026, at 77, he has returned to the greater Chicago area, back where everything started, back to the city whose comedy scene shaped him before Hollywood ever knew he existed. He's still listed as active, still taking the occasional role, still showing up. Some actors never quite figure out how to stop. Vivian Bonnell. She was 66 when she played Orticia in Ghost. Oda Mae Brown's assistant at the fake psychic parlor, the woman sitting quietly in the background while chaos unfolded around her. But Vivian Bonnell's real life made that scene look tame. Born in Antigua in 1924 under the name Enid Mosier, she spent the 1940s as one of the Caribbean's most celebrated calypso singers, performing with her Trinidad Steel Band at venues like the Village Vanguard in New York City, carrying the sounds of the West Indies into American nightclubs at a time when that took real courage. Her path to Hollywood ran straight through Broadway. In 1954, she starred opposite Pearl Bailey in the Truman Capote musical House of Flowers, and it was there, among the cast, that she met Austin Stoker, a steel pan musician who would become her husband. She changed her name to Vivian Bonnell, and the two built a life together in Los Angeles across 5 decades, both working steadily in film and television. She appeared in Sanford and Son Summer School with Mark Harmon, Teachers with Nick Nolte, and then Ghost in 1990. She died on November 18, 2003 in Los Angeles, 79 years old, from complications of diabetes. That same year, her husband Austin Stoker also passed away. Two people who had found each other in a Broadway musical in 1954 built an entire life together and left the world within months of each other. Gail Boggs. Gail Boggs was 39 when she played Louise Brown in Ghost, Oda Mae's skeptical sister, the one rolling her eyes in the background while everyone else drove the story forward. That role captured something true about her entire career. Then, in 1984, she ran her own one-woman cabaret show in Manhattan for a year and a half. She was even one of the first people to hear Madonna's Like a Virgin as a demo, personally pushing producer Nile Rodgers to release it as the lead single. The song became one of the biggest hits in pop history. Nobody remembers it was her idea. After Ghost, she kept working. Curly Sue in 1991, EDTV in 1999, 4 decades of Broadway productions, before stepping sideways into the industry as an executive, trading the spotlight for influence. Then came the moment that changed everything. Her daughter, Maddie Larson, became the 2010 U.S. National Gymnastics champion and a World Championship silver medalist. And then Maddie stood in a Michigan courtroom and delivered a victim impact statement against Larry Nassar, the USA gymnastics team doctor who had sexually abused hundreds of young athletes for decades, telling him directly, "I can't even put into words how much I fucking hate you." In 2026, at 74, Gail Boggs lives quietly in Los Angeles, largely away from public life. A woman who spent her whole career stepping aside raised a daughter who refused to. Angelina Estrada, Rosa Santiago, had maybe 2 minutes in Ghost. The woman sitting across from Oda Mae Brown during the seance scene, listening to Whoopi Goldberg rattle off an increasingly absurd list of Hispanic names trying to contact her dead relatives. Angelina Estrada was 58 when she played exactly these kinds of roles. Beside this role, she was Aunt Belita in Cheech and Chong's Up in Smoke in 1978, Carlos's mother in Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare in 1991, and appearances across Chico and the Man, Martin, Sister Sister, and Dream On. An entire career built on being the most believable person in scenes Hollywood barely bothered to write. Outside the screen, she was living a life that had nothing to do with any of it. Her son Bobby Shayer was the drummer for Bad Religion, one of the most influential punk rock bands in American music history, whose albums like Suffer and No Control defined an entire generation of underground music in the late 1980s. She died on August 5, 2005, in Las Vegas, Nevada, from heart failure at the age of 73. Through her life, she never had a single leading role. She didn't need one. Stephen Root. Nobody remembers the police sergeant in Ghost. At 39, Stephen Root had maybe 3 lines, a uniform, and a scene that lasted long enough to move the plot forward before disappearing entirely. That was 1990, and after this role, his journey was like a storm. 15 months touring the country and driving Miss Daisy finally got him to Los Angeles. Then came News Radio, King of the Hill, the Coen Brothers. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, No Country for Old Men, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Then Office Space in 1999, where he played Milton Wadhams, a mumbling, stapler-obsessed office drone who became one of the most quoted characters in American comedy history. The film bombed at the box office, made almost nothing opening weekend. Then DVD happened, cable happened, and Milton Wadhams became immortal. Root didn't become famous from a hit. He became famous from a failure the world eventually caught up to. The career just kept compounding. Get Out with Jordan Peele, Boardwalk Empire, Succession, Barry, where his performance as Monroe Fuches earned him an Emmy nomination at 67 for a role so unsettling it made audiences genuinely uncomfortable. He has now appeared in 4 Best Picture Oscar-nominated films: Ghost, No Country for Old Men, Selma, and Get Out. In 2026, at 75, he's starring in Widow's Bay on Apple TV, still married to actress Romy Rosemont, still the most quietly dangerous person in any room he walks into. He became one of the most decorated character actors in Hollywood history. Said Faraj. Said Faraj was 29 when he played the cab driver in Ghost, a character with no name, no backstory, and maybe 30 seconds of screen time. What nobody on set knew was that the man behind the wheel had lived a story more dramatic than anything in the script. At 13, he had been pulled into the Lebanese Civil War, fighting with Druze militias, watching friends and family die around him. In October 1983, he secured one of the last U.S. visas out of the American embassy in Beirut, the day before it was bombed, fled through sniper fire to the airport, and landed in America with $335, minimal English, and nowhere to sleep. 7 years later, Ghost was one of his first credits. He appeared in True Romance with Christian Slater in 1993, The Siege with Denzel Washington in 1998, 24 on television, NCIS, SWAT, SEAL Team. Then came Green Zone in 2010, directed by Paul Greengrass alongside Matt Damon. He played Sayed Hamza, a military adjunct to a Ba'athist general, and brought something to the role that no script could manufacture: the actual memory of what war sounds like from the inside. He was submitted for the 42nd Image Award for Best Supporting Actor. In 2026, at 65, Said Faraj is still active, producing independent films through his company Cedar Films, advocating for authentic Middle Eastern representation in Hollywood, and supporting young immigrant actors navigating the same industry that once only saw him as a threat. So that's the cast of Ghost. Some still here, some long gone, and all of them carrying stories that never made it onto the screen. Which one surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more then and now stories just like this one.